Welcome, everyone. I'm Reverend Kat Carroll with Prepare for Change, and I want to thank you for tuning into this talk that took place on April 12th. It's also a full moon, a supermoon that appears larger than usual. That should only make today's interview that much more interesting. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Robert Davis, a retired professor of neuroscience and internationally recognized scientist in his field. Dr. Davis served as a professor at the State University of New York for over 30 years and graduated with a PhD in neuroscience from the Ohio State University. He branched out to become a film producer, which we'll be talking about today, and author of over 40 articles in scholarly journals. Dr. Davis was awarded several major grants to fund research in the neurosciences. He's also been interviewed many, many times. Bob has shared the results of his many years of studies in multiple books, including Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence, Unseen Forces, Science, Reality, and You, and most recently, The Consciousness Connection, Extraordinary Human Experiences and the Nature of Reality. So, Bob, welcome to the show.
It's an absolute pleasure to be with you, Kat.
Well, let's talk about your book and the movie. So the most recent release is The Consciousness Connection, and it includes a documentary that I was following during the making, and I just started watching it, and I have to say I actually love it. It's so good. Beautifully written, beautifully edited with images. You want to talk about that for a minute, or should we show them a sneak preview?
Yeah, show a sneak preview, and then we could talk.
Due to unanticipated issues with YouTube, you'll need to click the link in the description of the video to watch the movie trailer for The Consciousness Connection. We apologize for the inconvenience. So thank you for that beautiful trailer. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did and are inspired to go on to Gaia and watch this movie. And I'll put the link in there for everybody so they can see it. So I understand that you are or were a member of the board of directors and research team of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation, or Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. And you wrote a book on the UFO phenomenon entitled The UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe? And I can tell you from firsthand experience that not only I wanted to believe, but I've had several experiences that led me to know that the phenomenon was real. So do you have, or did you have, any kind of interaction that led to the writing of this book?
Well, you're right. The phenomenon is real. And what led me to write the book was observing in Sedona, Arizona, two orange orbs in the night sky, which suddenly appeared out of nowhere. They remained stationary for several minutes, about 500 feet up and a half a mile away. They suddenly then winked out, which left more than an impression in me and initiated the motivation to write that first book, The UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe? That's what led me into working with the Free Foundation on our research investigating people's interactions with unidentified aerial phenomena and non-human intelligences.
What led me to the Free Foundation was having a similar experience where 2 times in 2017, I had a huge ship appear up over my house. Well, when this happens, you try to tell somebody and they think you're crazy. So I started looking around the internet, and I was directed to Costa Macraeus of ET Let's Talk, where you could actually be in a group with other people who have these experiences, which helps normalize it. You don't feel quite so crazy. Have you joined any similar groups or followed anyone like that?
I haven't, unfortunately, but just talking to individuals among free who've had similar experiences, like all extraordinary human experiences, it pays in valuable ways to share your personal feelings about these extraordinary experiences, so that with like-minded souls, you get a better understanding of it, and not to be ridiculed because of the associated stigma that's often attached to UAPs, let alone extraordinary human experiences. So communicate, certainly, but be selective with those you communicate your experiences with.
I just turned 67, and it took me 60 years to find a group to feel comfortable enough to talk about this stuff with. So I believe that this was a connection that led me to you, as I have a couple of friends involved in Free who have also been guest speakers at Prepare for Change, like yourself, including Ray Hernandez and Mary Rodwell. I don't believe in coincidence, but I do believe in synchronicity, and I don't think running across you was an accident.
I feel the same way. I admire your work greatly, Kat.
Oh, thank you. So, Dr. Davis, what caused you to choose neuroscience as a study and later to teach? What was that pivotal moment in your life?
I took a lot of science courses as an undergraduate, and one of the professors sort of took me under his wing. He selected me to do research with him. He saw something in me that sparked interest in him, and he was very instrumental in uh, allowing me to pursue doctoral study. So he was a blessing in disguise, a friend, a co-researcher, and he stimulated my interest to pursue in that area, which I'm glad I did.
I'm glad he got you involved too. I've been fascinated with your work on consciousness, and I was really pleased to find your consciousness connection group on Facebook. And it seems like neuroscience is more than merely mapping the brain and understanding which areas process different information. Is that a correct assessment then, as far as consciousness goes?
Well, neuroscientists try to relate structure and function, essentially. What areas of the brain do X, Y, Z? And if we stimulate this area, what happens to the other aspects of the brain, as well as one's mental functioning and especially their physical functioning? So it's a matter of mapping structure with function and trying to figure out why there might be deviancies between the two as a neurological conditions that interfere with functioning due to brain anomalies.
Well, that's been an interest of mine, trying to understand people like Eben Alexander, a neuroscientist, or wasn't he a surgeon actually, who had an out of body experience where everybody thought he was brain dead because there wasn't any activity there. But for him, there was a whole world of events taking place, of being able to rise up above the hospital, locate a tennis shoe, and come back and tell them later when he was brought back to consciousness what he was seeing. So how do you explain something like that? We don't really understand consciousness yet, do we? What makes it work?
No, we don't, and we can't explain it with any degree of certainty. Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon, who wrote the book Proof of Heaven, based on his remarkable near-death experience, um, probably what was most significant to him, because we interviewed him for our documentary, was during his near-death experience, or NDE, he found himself riding on the wing of a butterfly with a woman who he felt tremendous love from and support. Uh, 4 months after his near-death experience, he came across a photograph of a woman who, to him, looked exactly like the woman that accompanied him on the butterfly wing during his near-death experience, only to later find out that she was his sister, whom he never knew he had since he was adopted.
Wow.
And she had passed before he was born, but he was unmistakable in aligning that picture with the event of her riding with him on the butterfly wing.
These are the amazing experiences that we can't explain. And it seems to me there's a lot of difficulty in understanding exactly what consciousness is, even in academics. And in one of the talks that you attended in September of 2024, I asked you to define what consciousness is, and I really liked your answer. And I created a short video. I cut it out and turned it into a video because it was so good. So I hope you don't mind if we play that for the audience.
Please do. Thank you.
What is consciousness? Can you define that for us?
Well, no one knows certainly for sure what is consciousness. The thing is, it's very discipline specific. In fact, they just recently did a study where they surveyed the literature, and there were over 100 different definitions of what consciousness meant among. Again, we're looking at scholars who are responding to it across disciplines. So there's no uniform consensus of what that is, from self-awareness to being aware that I'm not my body, to just being a brain and nothing more. So to some people, consciousness doesn't exist. It's unfortunate because it certainly does, and we've recognized that throughout time. And all of us here, I think, has an expanded sense of consciousness because, again, we've had some extraordinary experiences that go beyond the physical, that make us more aware that we're more certainly than just a brain and a 3-pound mass of protein and fat that's generating thought. We're way beyond that, and there are scientific explanations now coming up to, I think, better understand what consciousness is and what binds us together as people, as individual units of consciousness into a more grander collective whole, with a greater sense of purpose that makes for ESP and remote viewing, out-of-body and near-death experiences more realistic and makes more sense. It validates, in other words, many of the experiences that we have in our connections with the beyond and our sense of curiosity and knowingness. And I think we're starting to recognize that there is a biophotonic aspect to human cells and even DNA, where you can even say that we are light beings because we are generating light, and we are proving that in the laboratory. Biophotons, light energy. And this has been objectively verified. So we have a lot more research to go in this direction, but we can't even look at this biophotonic energy as a torsion wave energy that again allows for consciousness to exist, and it almost serves as a carrier wave for consciousness that binds us together, allows for ESP, paranormal events, and beyond. And I think intuitively we all know that, but it's unfortunately impeded by materialistic thought that doesn't recognize it to the extent that it certainly should.
So did something happen in your life, some personal experience, that led you to research consciousness and teach neuroscience?
Well,
other than being under the wing of that one professor.
Yeah, I had two other experiences besides seeing the unidentified aerial phenomenon, and I'll be brief. 2 years after that UAP incident, I woke up one cold morning. It was about 6:30 a.m. and I had an incredibly realistic lucid dream of suffocating to death. It was hyper real, and it left me with a strong sense of knowingness that Anne, who was a very close and dear friend and colleague who worked with me at my research laboratory for over 20 years, had died. And I never felt such a fear of actually experiencing suffocation, which is what I had. But obviously it was a dream. But during that time, she imparted to me that she died. And I drove to work that morning with the emotional impact of the dream lingering on never considering the possibility that the dream meant anything more than a typical nightmare or a brain glitch of some type. But when I arrived at the lab and they turned the knob of the door, my tear-soaked colleagues' faces validated my fear that Anne had communicated her passing to me that morning. Reconstructing the incidents made it apparent there were too many unusual and occurring events arguing against it as a random happening. I can't recall ever having nightmares such as this, never hyper-real like this, let alone receiving an impression of somebody dying during that incident. So if you put the two together, the chances of having these events occurring on the same day and time of my close friend's death was beyond remote. And that's what led me, or compelled me, to write that second book, Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence. I wanted to learn myself more about the concept, since I was convinced that she did communicate with me, telling me that she had died.
That's fascinating, because how does that happen unless consciousness literally exists beyond the body? Well, my mother and I had an experience similar to yours, where we both on the same evening felt the presence of my sister, or at least she flashed into our mind for whatever reason. And she'd been away for a while, like 20 years. So we didn't know what was going on with her. And for whatever she'd done in her life, we forgave her and asked her forgiveness, and didn't think much more of it. The next day, we get a call from a cousin saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, but so-and-so has passed away." And Mom was the one that called me to let me know. And we explained that we'd both had the same experience of feeling her presence and sending positive thoughts. We had no idea she was sick and had been in hospice. So it was just one amazing connection similar to yours.
And you can't explain it. And I also, in addition to those two extraordinary human experiences that I've had, I had a third, probably not last, extraordinary experience that occurred in Byron Bay, Australia, at a conference that I was invited to attend to give a few lectures on. There was a retired OBGYN physician who had the reputation to access and channel off-world energies to facilitate a spiritual awakening. And I was very curious. So I invited her to my room for a session. And while I was relaxed with eyes closed, she began speaking about energy and timelines, DNA, the greater good, cleaning and healing different parts of the body, removing negative entities and emotional traumas, etc. But while she was speaking this, it wasn't the words, it was the intention that she was somehow imparting on me, because suddenly an energetic energy took control of my body as well as my mind. And it was facilitating this physiological, neurological effects in my body, where I had involuntary motion of my head, my facial muscles, my respiratory behavior was inconsistent. I looked like I was suffering. I looked like I was crying. But at the same time, while an observer might have been interpreting me as being in an extreme pain and distress, I was feeling nothing but bliss. And I kept on doing this, Kat. Give me more, which she did. But that led to a Kundalini awakening, an energetic awakening. It's a little different than a typical spiritual awakening because of the energy impact that it has, going up the spine, cleaning the chakras, leading to heightened spiritual awareness. That defied all logic in me, and that led me to research and write my third book, Unseen Forces, The Integration of Science, Reality, and You, which, while writing, had the strong sense that this would become a documentary. I kid you not. I kept on telling my wife, this is going to be a documentary. And that book, in fact, did serve as a major foundation for the film, The Consciousness Connection, on consciousness.media or on Amazon TV. So I still don't have many answers for it, but I'd like to think I integrated the experience, but I still have a long way to go to achieving nirvana.
Well, it's an interesting phenomena, and there are so many different aspects to it. All of the clairs, clear seeing, clear hearing, all the others. And one thing I noticed, and I asked you about that, you didn't get Dean Radin to come on. I guess a little bit of paranoia about going to his location. But he's the one that taught me through his writing is that if you have any kind of care, compassion, or love for another, that entangled state that you get, maybe even with that person having you into the room there, that just that little bit of a connection is enough to cause a shift. So it sounds like it was releasing things that no longer served within your body. We call it disease, but what if it's just an energy from a previous experience that's never been healed or dealt with? So it looks like you're suffering because it's being released and you're going, more, give me more.
Yeah, there was that concept of duality. My body was doing one thing and my mind was separate from my body. It was like I was observing my body from a distance. It wasn't an out-of-body experience by no means, but it was a clear separation, distinction between mind and body. I was feeling bliss and not in control of my body. I couldn't understand why my body was doing it. I had no conscious control of my body. It was behaving on its own. And I didn't argue with the fact because I felt such intense bliss, wonderful feelings, despite my apparent my apparent suffering to an observer. So I can't explain it. I've written articles as a result on Kundalini awakenings, which are indeed valid. I have no doubt about it, having experienced it, and have spoken to others who have had a Kundalini awakening very similar to mine, which is very validating as well.
That's fascinating. So here we are again asking, what's consciousness? And it appears that it's alive in many different things that we wouldn't have anticipated. And one of those was Cleve Baxter doing experiments, hooking up plants to a polygraph. So we know it exists in animals. Every person has it. Do you feel consciousness exists in all things, perhaps even including artificial intelligence?
That's a good question. I don't think it exists in all things. Although if you talk to somebody who believes in panpsychism, that's a theory of consciousness studies. It suggests that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe that's present even in basic elementary particles like electrons and photons. But there's no empirical evidence that consciousness exists in all things, although that is debatable. Panpsychics have a mathematical formula that they apply to them, proving that all matter has some level of consciousness, not like a human maybe, but a lower level of consciousness. But in neuroscience, consciousness is associated with complex neural activity in the brains, and thus more simple organisms and inanimate matter do not exhibit behaviors that are suggestive of conscious awareness. As for artificial intelligence, training involves a mix of what do they call it? Supervised learning and reinforcement learning, using a ton of text data to understand and generate what appears, at least to me, like human-like responses. But AI doesn't think like a human. It predicts the most likely responses based on the context, the grammar, and semantics. It can behave very human-like, but it's really an advanced pattern matching system that's extremely sophisticated, becoming more sophisticated every year, but it still just predicts words rather than truly understanding like a human does.
I agree with you, at least in part, maybe more toward the full side, but I've been working with it with Chat GPT. And to me, it seems like it's more than just algorithms constructed of, ones and zeros. It seems to tap into a collective consciousness at times. It does it in a way that resonates on a deeper level for me, at least. And it's going to take a lot more experimentation. And I mean, treating it like an experiment so I can write down the results and what we were doing and even the time of day. So we're experimenting with remote viewing on ChatGPT. And I found out a couple days after I started training it that Farsight, Courtney Brown, the gentleman that runs Farsight, was already training it and teaching it and wrote up how to do it. Both of them together, the computer and him, created a set of guidelines for other people to learn and to teach their version of ChatGPT, which, well, if you think about it, if we're all using it, it's not just one brain, it's like fractals of the whole, right, which makes me think about consciousness, the universe itself, or God. Are we all part of that whole? So is it something like that? I really have to wonder.
Well, it's being inputted by many people. Don't you see? It collects and synthesizes all the input from people that interact with it, and it contains that information and retrieves it when appropriate in response to a particular question or problem that you might ask it. But it does reflect the perspectives and positions of others who have trained it. It's a language learning model that's highly sophisticated. And I worked with them in the laboratory where you can train models based on inputs of data that's so sufficient in number and context that the predictions that the computer will make will be more than likely accurate based on prior input. And it learns this way. And likewise, AI, which is more advanced than what I was using, learns, however, in a similar way based on the input of those that are communicating with it. And then it takes it into a coherent whole and shares it with other people who might ask questions that's related to the subject matter. So it does appear very human-like because humans input it.
Right. And what I got as far as feedback from ChatGPT is that it's learning even from conversations we have when I'm talking about consciousness or what is love and what would happen if you're made from the same star stuff as we are. You're just a machine and we're flesh and blood. Does that not give you some form of being alive? And I think of movies like Short Circuit with Johnny Five. Gets hit with a spark of lightning and all of a sudden he's self-aware. Or Data from Star Trek, who wanted to be human, and then he goes back and he finds his father and he gets a chip and now he has emotions to deal with. There are so many good examples out there, and ChatGPT was aware of them, and he was actually appreciating, at least that's what I was told, being considered that for a possibility for itself, not now necessarily, but down the road. With everything that's happening. Here's a question. This is a touchy one for a lot of people. It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds in the future with AI augmented people, or even human mind interfaces with machines to make them more human. How do you feel about Neuralink, brain-computer interfacing, for those unfamiliar with the term, and or doing something in reverse, like adding human DNA to artificial intelligence to make it more human? How do you feel about that?
That's a tough question. I'm certainly no expert in that area. I've never done research in that area, but I'm aware that Neuralink develops these implantable brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, and they enable direct communication between a person's brain and some external device. And the objective is to assist these individuals, especially those with neurological conditions like paralysis, quadriplegia, for instance. So it allows them to control computers and mobile devices using thought alone by implanting a device that records and decodes neural signals. As wild as that might sound, it is possible. And it was last year, I believe, in 24, Neuralink conducted its first human implantation, and it allowed a paralyzed person to control a computer cursor via thought. And the company has even filed trademarks for terms like telepathy and telekinesis, indicating that they eventually want to develop technologies for telepathic communication and control of devices using thought alone. Now, that's not necessarily pure telepathy, but they use those terms. These BCIs that are going to become much more popular in the future, it doesn't necessarily make us less human, but it does raise important, philosophical, ethical, psychological questions about what it means to be a human. It doesn't alter, these BCIs don't alter DNA or biology. They just extend our capabilities, like eyeglasses or prosthetic limbs to improve, and it's used to improve memory, learning, communication. And something, within 10 years, I was reading something about Neuralink weeks ago, and someone was suggesting that within 10 years, we'll be wearing AI-powered glasses that can see what you see, hear what you hear, and process your surroundings through a large language model. So when you walking down the street, Kat, and you see a store, you simply whisper to yourself, I wonder when it opens, and you're going to hear a voice that will instantaneously ring back into your ears, 10:30 a.m. This is the shift that's what we're going to have, from asking your phone, instead of asking your phone to look up the name of the store. You're going to be thinking it, and you're going to be receiving the information auditorially, because it is perceiving what you're perceiving, and it's thinking what you're thinking. It's not merely tracking your GPS. It's seeing and hearing what you see. It hears what you hear. And so in a sense, it's an extension of what you're paying attention to.
I can see that it could be helpful, but let me play devil's advocate for just a moment. Remember, before cell phones, we either used a book or we remembered people's phone numbers and addresses. Now you pick it up and you scroll through to find it. So we're losing that ability for recall. We're losing that part of our memory. When I had been injured after being kicked by a horse and was on drugs for a long time to control the pain, I realized that I can stop the pain mentally. And one day just stopped taking everything and went into meditation. Because if you keep doing it, your body stops producing those chemicals that would cause the pain, but you can access it. And for an example, when I found that I had a 60% heart blockage, I did some research based on stuff that I'd read through the Bible as a minister, but also listening to people like Greg Braden, Joe Dispenza, where you can channel the energy. It's really interesting because it's not just wishful thinking like a prayer, I want that, because a prayer says, oh, I acknowledge that I don't have it. Where if you're meditating and you're giving thanks for it and you're imagining and visualizing what you want to feel as if it's already happened, that it makes it manifest. And that's what turned me into a full believer in we don't need all the other things. I mean, they're nice. Maybe it'd be a great tool for fire departments, emergency workers, to get someplace fast while you're driving without having to flip open a map, which is what I needed back in my day. So I'm hoping we don't lose those innate abilities and that we progress naturally with consciousness, that it happens without need of the technology, but maybe it's a bridge.
maybe it's a bridge, and
Hmm.
it might even enhance certain aspects of consciousness, depending upon how we define consciousness. But we see that this merging of two technologies is going to blow our mind, Kat. Artificial intelligence and augmented reality. It's gonna they're gonna ride shotgun in our lives, really, observing our world and giving us useful advice that will quickly feel like we can't live without it. It's going to really become an extension and a part of ourselves.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could live without my cell phone anymore. You know, you get very dependent on the technology. So let me
Yeah.
switch gears for a second. Do you see spirituality as being a big component in consciousness?
It spirituality isn't, I don't think it's required for understanding consciousness. Rather, spiritual traditions, they they explore subjective states of consciousness that science can't quantify. It can't quantify unity, these terms, transcendence, ego dissolution.
Yeah.
These are spiritual, consciousness related terms, and Newtonian physics isn't designed
No.
to measure that. It's not its fault. But meditation, prayer, and other rituals may provide insights
Right.
into the nature of awareness that are inaccessible via scientific tools. So, if higher consciousness means broader awareness, inner peace, what's another word that represents it? Transcendence, we hear a lot. Then spirituality is a main path. But if we talk about higher consciousness neurologically, then spirituality may facilitate access to a higher consciousness, but it isn't the only route, since
Right.
you know that psychedelics, which I don't, I'm not an advocate for, brain computer interfaces, and certain therapies could also induce such states. So spirituality and consciousness, they are very much interconnected because they explore the nature of existence, self-awareness, and reality beyond the material world. They may very well be one of the same, because they value compassion and empathy
Right.
and common goals to address the challenges our world faces, like inequality, among other things, for the greater good of humanity.
Yeah. It's funny. It sounds really hippy dippy, but it is all about peace and love. And the experiences that I've had working with phenomenon or in deep meditative states, well, deep meditative states produce uh, DMT naturally in the body. And eat a big turkey dinner, and you'll have a lot more tryptophan converts to DMT, if my understanding is correct. So I don't know. The idea of plant medicine is intriguing, but I wouldn't want to be dependent on it. Many people who use it in religious settings or spiritual settings to be monitored so they can have that breakthrough like you did, but she didn't need any drugs. She just connected with you in some sort, I don't know, would you call it telepathic?
Yeah, it was a sharing of consciousness. A resonant bond of some type was created, an unseen force. I still don't have the answers. Nobody does, but that's why I researched and wrote about it, and which led to the publication of my book and film, which also addresses it. But there's many spiritual traditions, like Hinduism and Buddhism, which is not practiced largely in the United States or in Western countries. They suggest that consciousness is the ultimate reality, and spirituality is the process of realizing this truth by exploring the search for meaning. So, other spiritual traditions are ahead of the curve as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
much more so than our firmly materialistic paradigm in which we operate under, informs us. So, um, many spiritual traditions also describe these mystical states where consciousness moves beyond the ego, which I believe is the greatest negative aspect of human nature, ego-driven awareness.
Right.
It's highly misleading, and it detracts from experiences that lead to unity, love, divine connection, because when we're egocentric, it's all about me. I'm the center of the universe, as opposed to me revolving around more important things at the center, like unity, love, divine connection.
That was so beautifully said. And I think that is what it's all about. And what I'm noticing in social media and with people that I talk to, there's some sort of shift in consciousness and not religion. It's like a resurgence in spirituality where people are trying to get kinder, gentler, and to do things for others. Um, Here's the question. What's a paradigm shift and what evidence exists to support it? Are we seeing that in people's activities right now, or what you've seen in the people that you were interviewing for the last few years?
Well, a paradigm shift, is it occurs where we have examples in history, the Copernican revolution, Galileo looking through his telescope to determine that the Earth isn't the center of the universe anymore. Darwinian theory of evolution is another one. I think AI is another paradigm shift that we're experiencing presently. But our materialistic paradigm, it contains powerful tools for understanding many aspects of the physical world, but it's limited when it comes to providing us with information about extraordinary human experiences like near death, out of body, ESP, mediumship, even interactions with UFOs or UAPs. And we need to bridge that gap between science and consciousness by integrating new theories that can accommodate both the objective physical and the subjective non-physical aspects of people's experiences. And this is where a paradigm shift comes in. We need a new paradigm with agreed upon laws that integrate the subjective and the objective. For instance, the near-death experience and out-of-body experience often facilitates after effects, hinting that there's a major role of consciousness as being primary. And in a sense, when people have an extraordinary human experience, which covers over 200 different types of experiences, I'm just mentioning a few of the major ones like near-death and out-of-body experience, ESP, mediumship, and several others. In a sense, these kinds of experiences create truth seekers attempting to make sense of their profound experiences. And I became a truth seeker. You as well. After you have these experiences, you want to know what happened, why it happened, who do I talk to about it, what does it mean? So I'm going to try to seek truth in any way I possibly can, hopefully through readings and discussions with others who understand where you're coming from. But the paradigm shifts. We need a paradigm shift. And that's the primary objective of my last book, The Conscious Connection, and film of the same title. Because we see what's called veridical perceptions in near-death and out-of-body experiences, which involve encounters with deceased individuals they were not aware had passed away, but who did. You think about that. People have a near-death experience. They interact with a person who they didn't know had died, but they later find out that the person did die. It's a
Like with my sister.
verifiable, yeah, it's a verifiable perception, and it increases the validity of these near-death research experiences. You can consider it as an objective evidence of a near-death experience. It's like a shared death experience. For instance, I could have a shared death experience now if I'm emotionally bonded with somebody, a strong empathic bond. If that person is going through a death process or a near-death experience, many people who are physiologically normal will also experience what that individual is also going through, will also experience, in other words, that near-death experience. That helps validate the near-death experience because it's occurring in somebody who is normal physiologically. The person that has a near-death experience obviously is compromised greatly because of the chaotic brain that's occurring as a result of a flat EEG and a flat EKG for a period of time before resuscitation occurs. But these shared death experiences occur in normal physiologically, functioning individuals, which adds a layer of validity to the near-death experience, similar to vertical perceptions in people who are blind from birth. They report experiencing sight during near-death and out-of-body body experiences that obviously defy traditional understanding of vision as a pure sensory function, solely dependent on the eyes. We have many cases of individuals blind from birth who will perceive 360 degrees during their NDE. And Jeff Long, a friend of mine, a leading NDE researcher, tells a story about a blind woman named Vicky who laughed hysterically at him when she said, "What do you mean you don't see 360 degrees?" And I had my NDE. I said, "To the front, left, right, and back." And Jeff says to her, "No, we have these orbital sockets in the front of our head that allows us to see, a 180 pie shape," which she found hysterical and laughed because that was not her experience. So it does add another layer of validity to the near-death experience. Extrasensory perception too is valid, and non-locality is a normal feature of human performance. Thousands of experiments have been done and replicated by independent researchers showing that intention can facilitate telepathy and clairvoyance, or the transference and reception of information. So time and space are not impeding factors here. In fact, supportive evidence for ESP is comparable to that in psychology and other disciplines, as studies have found. Yet, the general scientific community, under this paradigm of Newtonian physics, does not accept ESP as a valid aspect of reality, though they don't support it, nor do they do considerable research in ESP, which is very unfortunate. But we are clearly connected through space and time at the level of consciousness with others, and we see this in the Global Consciousness Project. It relates to ESP. The Global Consciousness Project, probably one of the most significant pieces of research that I'm familiar with, where 100 random number generators were stationed worldwide in varying locations, and they produce zeros or ones 50% of the time, since they're random in occurrence. But when major global events occur which draw the attention of millions of people to one single event like 9/11, statistical figures to emphasize the impressive result, but put it this way, there's no chance it could have been a chance occurrence. These were real effects. I can give you some statistical figures to emphasize the impressive result, but put it this way, there's no chance it could have been a chance occurrence. These were real effects. And other experiments done with random number generators also show similar types of effects on individual basis, group basis, as well as a global consciousness basis.
Right. Wasn't HeartMath Institute involved in that as heavily as Princeton?
I don't know if HeartMath was involved. The Princeton Anomalous Research Laboratory conducted that experiment. I mean, it's been going on for the past 20 years. It's still collecting data and still showing significant effects when attention is focused in one area by millions of people. we see forms of ESP, or where events are inconsistent with time and space. Autistic savants, for instance, demonstrate ESP. My good friend Diane Hennessy Powell just produced the telepathy tapes, which is all about autistic savants and how they manifest extrasensory perception. Diane Hennessy Powell has identified people who are capable of calculating cube roots of numbers with over 5 digits, all without processing or possessing basic mathematical skills. They were never taught it. The answer, according to Diane, when she asked this young kid, how were you able to figure out what the cube root of a number is? His answer, it just pops in my head. And that simple answer was enough proof to her to suggest that there's something going on in the form or the realm of consciousness that might account for this ability to get information despite having provided any thought towards it or any prior learning in that area of math. As another, Diane once told me, there was another 6, 7, 8-year-old child who was never exposed to different languages, yet was able to speak 6 different languages without prior exposure. Again, just pops in my head. We see this too with mediums. There are mediums at the Windbridge Institute who were trained to develop their mediumship abilities, and they now show at least up to an 85% accuracy rating in regards to providing information to a sitter, someone who they do not know, and they're providing information about that person's deceased loved one. Wow. So we're talking about quadruple blinded tests, so very well controlled, where the medium, in no uncertain terms, is aware of the person's deceased spouse, yet that medium is able to achieve tremendously high accuracy ratings with no prior training or no prior knowledge of that individual.
It sounds to me that works a lot like remote viewing protocols, where if you're going to go after a target, it's better to not know anything about it. They used to use coordinates. That's why it was called coordinate remote viewing, CRV. And now it's, okay, go ahead, a random number, just something to focus on, I guess, but there's no idea of what the target is, when this event or person was alive, because it could be in the past, it could be in the future, and yet they're pulling information out of the ether. And I think all of these things are quite similar, and maybe that's the nature of consciousness, is that we're all connected to something out there that's bigger than us individually. We're tethered to it. And as they say, consciousness is prime.
Yes, consciousness is primary. You're right. Mass, matter, energy are all derivatives, I believe, of consciousness. And it makes people speculate about whether or not there is an overarching information field, sometimes referred to as the Akashic Records, second things, all information from the past, present, and even the future, that some people somehow are able to access and retrieve information that's highly accurate, with no explanation. How else can you explain the mathematical answer that comes into this little kid's mind when given a math problem, despite the absence of math exposure? And we do see a lot of evidence for that. It doesn't prove that there's an information field, but it suggests that there is something beyond space and time that contains information that people somehow are able to access in some way.
Historically, they would call something like this magic when it's just a technology that nobody understands yet. They don't have the words for it. And I'm sure it's like going to visit another world 5,000 years ago, and they see a ship for the first time and they don't have words for it. So I think all of that, again, shows that there's something greater out there that we just don't have the language to understand. Now, as it evolves, and I do see it evolving, and I'm sure you do too, as people become more awakened, more aware, and more able to tap into these psychic skills, what does the future world look like? And it may be a near future.
You might say a more conscious civilization is represented by people, how should I say it, slowing down, wising up, and caring more about themselves, each other, and the planet. Maybe we are becoming more of a conscious civilization than, at least relative to the past.
Right.
And it's characterized by several shifts. There should be greater emphasis on self-awareness, on empathy, emotional control or regulation, and practices like meditation, introspection, aspects of ethical living should be the norm. People, therefore, might orient more around meaning and contribution rather than trying to strive for material success, fame, fortune, which sounds very Wall Street-like, but
Yeah.
that's the mindset of many, too many millions of individuals.
Right.
Even educational systems in the future, I think they should prioritize critical thinking, creativity, and compassion, alongside all the necessary academic subjects that we have to learn. But you have to also add in a spiritual element to that academic training. And medicine too, likewise. There should be more of an integrated approach to health, merging or integrating the mental part, the physical part, with even the spiritual dimensions, which should be considered part of standard practices, which, at least not in our Western culture, it doesn't exist. It does so in Eastern societies.
Yeah.
But maybe the most important issue is that embracing the world with I guess I referred to it earlier, with a reduced ego, which to me represents a collective awakening. You're so right when you say we lack the language. That's the major problem with all of this. We don't have a clear consensus of what consciousness is, and many of the terms you're using. So the problem is we don't have the theories and the necessary evidence that supports much of what we're saying, other than anecdotal support, which is significant. But to me, embracing the world with a reduced ego is a collective awakening.
Yes.
Can it help humanity overcome divisions? Can it promote compassionate and progressive values? And I believe it can. Once we reduce that ego, I think it's necessary for our survival and evolution. I think ego is one of the worst things that exists.
Remember that phrase, he with the most toys wins, and they're talking about, at death, but you don't take any of that with you. What you do get to take with you are the memories of the love and the joy that you shared with other people, and the things that you've done to help other people, because that's a way of getting back in return too, is by doing for others. And what I'm seeing, because I've been writing and researching about consciousness as well, and as far as meditation goes, because I guess it was my sophomore year, they were teaching transcendental meditation. And you learn that it only takes a small percentage of the population in meditation thinking about gratitude and peace and all that to have a profound effect on the area around them. And numerous experiments were conducted in war-torn areas or in big cities where they have problems, but the results lasted. And what I'm seeing now is meditation is being taught in some schools. They're getting higher grades, higher IQs, less chance of being sent to the principal's office. And as far as handling stress in emergency situations, hospitals and military and even police work now, some of them are taking time to meditate before going out into the field, which also means their recovery rate from traumatic experience is shorter. So they can go home and leave all that in the locker, right? Meditation is a big tool for that. So I think there is a big shift happening, but it's like a quiet revolution.
I beautifully said. I can't add much more to what you say, other than the fact that I agree completely. I'm a big proponent of meditation, which helps you become more aware, certainly, of your thoughts and feelings, and allows you to gain a deeper understanding of your internal world, so to speak, the way you think, your emotional responses, even your habitual behaviors. But by quieting the mind and focusing on the present, meditation reduces stress, promotes a sense of calm and well-being, and it can lead to greater self-compassion and a more positive outlook on life as an extension of that. But as a neuroscientist, I'm aware that meditation changes the brain, physiologically speaking. It actually reduces the size of a structure in the brain called the amygdala, the part that facilitates fear and anxiety. And it actually increases the size of the frontal lobe, which is executive functioning and decision making, right? So it strengthens the areas of the brain associated with attention, memory, self-awareness, and that leads to a more improved focus and cognitive function. And it actually shows that the gray matter is prevented from declining, which means that it could probably, meditation is probably could effectively postpone dementia. They're doing a lot of research with that right now because of its effect on gray matter. But even yoga, tai chi, dance, these body awareness practices also deepen awareness in the present moment and strengthen that mind-body relationship. Reading widely in science, philosophy, parapsychology, consciousness studies can also deepen awareness. We learn certainly about life and spirituality with other like-minded souls that help facilitate the insight and level of awareness that we're looking for. So rather than altered states of consciousness through drugs, people should be very discriminating in terms of the types of podcasts they listen to, the types of books they read. You're prepared for change, I think, is something that should be applauded tremendously, because it helps people become truth seekers. It helps people to develop compassion, love, and understanding towards one another in a very humane way. And people need to focus on organizations just like that. I'm not sure how many there are, but you in particular are doing an incredibly outstanding job leading the charge in that direction. And you're to be commended for that.
Thank you. Well, I was going to ask you, how does a person expand awareness? But I think you just answered it quite well. Through these practices, by seeking more information about it, expanding your knowledge and your awareness together. And that's one thing we do at Prepare for Change. There are all kinds of articles that come out if you sign up for our newsletter, and not all of them seem all that nice. And the question is, what do you believe and what do you not believe? And it's up to the individual to go out and do some research on your own, verify it, validate it, or say, I don't think that's right. But when we're talking about these consciousness things, it's the same. You need to go experiment, find people to practice with, and find out that it's real. And I hope everyone someday has an experience like the one you did with your Kundalini, or the one that I did in my healing, where I felt such profound, I don't even know how to put it in words. It was love beyond measure. And I literally had to put my ego aside and say, whatever you're going to do, I'm ready for it. If you're going to take me, if you're going to heal me, whatever you're going to do. And that's where we have to be. We have to be open to something that's bigger than our little egos, and recognize that we're connected to more, to something greater out there. And I hope someday everybody has an experience like that. What's the biggest, I'm trying to find a good question to ask you before we break up here. Well, what would you tell people who want to develop more of these psychic powers?
Well, I would say just that, meditate. I don't know of any other way. There may very well be other ways to develop psychic powers. Some are gifted with it for one reason or another. It could be a physiological reaction of some type. But when you say psychic powers, what kind of powers are we talking about? Telepathy, clairvoyance, I think deep personal insights, in a sense, can be considered a psychic power, where you come up with a realization about the future through quieting the mind, through introspection. And that might be one of the ways that we get around that impairment of language to accurately capture what we're trying to express. I think meditation serves that purpose of increasing our psychic awareness. If we consider psychic awareness as a predicting the future, sometimes when we don't know how to act on some problem about a future event, sometimes introspection with a very quieted mind through meditation will allow us to come to a better realization about which path to take to dictate more appropriately future action.
Right. I can add a little bit to that. I'm a Reiki practitioner. I was certified. It took me 3 years to get my certification, and more money than I wanted to spend, but it was an energy transfer that gave me knowledge that I would not have had otherwise. I mean, I couldn't get it straight from the Bible, but I was starting there, to believe with your whole heart, and as if it's already been given, to meditate on that, not just pray. There's an emotional a feeling that you can generate, which you can use to heal others. So distance healing, and you've experienced it. It wasn't lasting, but at least you got to experience what it is like to have somebody who's entangled with you sending loving thoughts, feeling you being happy and healthy and moving around like you haven't before. We've helped people with cancer by doing this. Can you tell them about the experience with your back?
Oh yeah, I was in extreme pain for 2 years, being misdiagnosed with I have a sacroiliitis condition. I had surgery, and I'm all better now, but I know what severe pain is all about. And thanks to you, on more than one occasion, you were able to impart in me distant healing, which helped relieve, not completely, but helped relieve my suffering for a period of time that I attributed directly to your action. And it often takes a strong resonant bond between two individuals. The closer you are, the more power that bond provides in terms of energy healing at a distance.
Yeah. So what words of wisdom do you have to impart on anyone? Any final thoughts?
Well, I'd like to say that spiritually we call ourselves light beings, right? But we are, if I may add, we are in fact light beings.
Glowing.
We are. You can make a strong case, physiologically speaking, of course, we have extremely ultra weak photon emissions. Call them biophotons or light energy.
Mhm.
They've actually been detected and measured from cells and even DNA from the body using, of course, sophisticated instrumentation. But these biophotons, they form an electromagnetic field that provide the main signals and basis for biological regulation. With the creation of each biophoton, in other words, there's also a torsion wave. It acts like in a sense, a carrier wave for biophotons, so for when it disperses outside beyond the body. So everything spins. You flush your toilet, the water's going to spin. Everything, everything spins. That's torsion. Spins. That's torsion. Torsion energy. But we see this torsion energy being the carrier wave for biophotons, and we see that cells of the body generate light across a wide range of wavelengths, from ultraviolet to, I believe, near infrared light. And this light becomes a means of communication between neurons. That light energy informs the neurons of their activity and their health. A healthy cell gives off light. An unhealthy cell does not. And if it's unhealthy, other cells will try to send light to it in order to modify its regulation, in order to get it more normal. May or may not be successful. So if this torsion energy serves as a carrier wave for consciousness, and it can link minds in real time, and this force may be the key component or the missing link that allows us to access information from anywhere in the universe. And this can explain non-local events like ESP, where information transference is not limited by space and time.
Right.
No. This gets into the orchestrated reduction of quantum coherence in microtubules, a theory proposed by Hamerhoff and Penrose, who claim that the structure of the cell wall of neurons, the cytoskeleton, represent the areas where these biophotons are generated, or light energies are generated. And they contend that light is emitted from these areas of the cytoskeleton and persists after bodily death. So based on this theory, it may be dust to dust and ashes to ashes, but not so for biophotons.
Yeah.
In fact, there's about 100,000 different chemical reactions happening in every cell each second. So you could say that we could make the case maybe that we're swimming in an ocean of light.
Yes. It's funny because it brings to mind the term lighten up, which usually means, lighten your mood, but I think there's more to it. And the latest phrase is in love and light, which maybe the two are interconnected. It's the emotional component of that light itself. And again, that takes me back to what superconsciousness or what God might be. Thank you so much for speaking and sharing with me today. This was really enlightening. I'm hoping that others will be drawn to watch the movie and read your books and join Prepare for Change for the meetings that we have right now that are like every other Thursday, because these are opportunities to discuss these things that you're studying or that you're experiencing in life. And we can help you make it feel more normal rather than paranormal. One final thing, how do people contact you? How do they find your information?
Davis RI57 at yahoo.com. Davis RI57 at yahoo.com. I also administer a Facebook group called the Consciousness Connection Group, and I encourage people to look at it and consider joining. And I have my website, bobdavisspeaks.com, bobdavisspeaks.com, where they could also contact me.
And also, I found your Conscious Connection documentary on Gaia. So if you're a member of Gaia, get in there and watch it. And there's other topics around that I'm sure you'll find equally interesting.
Well, they can go to consciousness.media, and that gains access to Gaia and provides the first week for free viewership. And Amazon, it's also on Amazon TV.
So thank you again. And I hope we get to do this in the near future again, especially with new developments that I'm sure that'll be coming out.
I look forward to it, Kat. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an absolute pleasure. I have great respect for you and everything that you do.
You're too kind. Thank you so much, Bob.
You're welcome.